All right, so now that we have our app set up so that users can actually create accounts, and the endpoint that does that, remember, will help keep our database in sync with Firebase auth, the next thing that we're going to do is take a look at how to do error handling in an application like ours. Okay, so currently there are a lot of things that can go wrong in our app, and when they go wrong, the user doesn't actually get any feedback, or worse, it actually causes our app to crash. And we saw that this was the case, for example, if the user tries to create an account with an email that already has an account on Firebase auth, right? If we try and create another account with john@gmail.com, for example, and click create account, our app is going to crash with this error saying auth email already in use. Now, obviously, this is not the best thing for user experience. We want to tell our users when they did something wrong without our app crashing. And that's what we're going to take a look at how to do right here. So another thing we're going to have to take a look at is when the user tries to log in, I believe that the same thing might happen if the user puts in the wrong password. If they say john@gmail.com and then just type in the wrong password. Yep, sure enough, we get another error, which is auth/wrong password from Firebase auth. And, just in general, besides these ones that are happening on the front end, there are also quite a few errors that are happening on the back end as well, potentially, right? We saw that one error that occurred when the user tried to access notes and our user database was out of sync. And just as a reminder, that was caused inside our list notes route, when basically we would try and get the user. We're just kind of assuming that the user exists here, and we're saying user.notes.map, and that right there would cause an error if the user doesn't exist. Okay, and the thing about these errors is that it's pretty easy to just pretend that they can't happen because the logic in our application doesn't allow them to happen, right? Currently, our create user route makes sure that the user database is kept in sync in theory. Okay, and that phrase, in theory, is something that applies quite heavily when you're designing an app that's as complex as this one and actually building it out, right? Because there might be some edge case that we haven't thought about that will cause our user database to be out of sync with Firebase auth. And in that case, we don't want thousands of errors happening in our server when, a bunch of users do the same kind of thing that causes that error. Okay, so what we're going to take a look at how to do is prevent errors like that from happening. And, it's just going to be a fun time. So let's start off here with our login and create account pages, because those are the first page that a lot of users will actually run into in our site, and we want it to be perfect. So let's open up our login page and login form. And we're going to open up our create account page and create account form. All right, so first of all, there's a few ways that we can go about this, but all of them are going to involve us displaying some kind of error above our login form when some kind of error occurs, right? So that'll probably be a little div here with, a red background that says something like error, and then a description of the error, right? So that's what we're going to want to do, and we can choose essentially where we want to display that, right? Do we want to display that in the login form, or do we want to display it in the login page? When we were first designing the login form, we were very explicit about keeping things like the login title and basically anything else that might not go along with the login form if we were to change the situation where the user is logging in, right? In other words, if the user were to log in through a modal instead, okay, we might not want to have this H1 heading, and we also wouldn't want to have this create account link to the create account page, because that wouldn't be how that would work if we were displaying this form inside of a modal. So with displaying errors, though, I'm going to argue that this is something that belongs in the login form because it's something that we're always going to want to do when the user tries to log in, right? There's never going to be a time when the login form isn't going to have to display some kind of error if something goes wrong during the login process. So here's how we're going to do that, because currently the login functionality here is in the login page, right? It's not actually in the login form. So the first way that occurs to me anyway to add an error to our login form would be to have our component use an error prop. Okay, so we'll say error and on submit. And then if any errors occur inside our login function here, what we'll do is we'll have a state variable which we'll call errors. We'll say const error and set error equals use state, and this will just be an empty string to start with. And if an error occurs while logging in, we're going to wrap this in a try-catch block so that we'll catch any errors. And then we'll say catch E. And whatever error occurs, we're just going to say set error to E. All right. And then what we can do is we can just pass this error state variable down to our login form like this. We can say error equals error. And then our login form can take care of displaying that. Now, we're going to want to display this error above the inputs here. So here's what that's going to look like. We're going to say paragraph, and we'll just display the error string inside of there. And we only want this to display, of course, if an error exists. So we're going to say error and error, and that will hide it if there is no error. So let's go back and check on this so far. Let's see how it works. Oops, we need to import use state in our login page, apparently. Here, let's move this down to there. We'll import use state up at the top here from React. All right, and if we go back now, what we're going to see if we log in poorly, right, if we log in here, it looks like we're getting an error because the error that's occurring that we're catching is actually not a string, as I was assuming it would be. So the way you do this actually is by saying e.message. That'll give us the message of the error. And let's try this thing again. We're just going to input stuff like that. And we can see this error here. Now, in general, you're not going to want to use the raw Firebase string. And as we saw in the friend tracker application, the way that we can change this is by actually having a mapping between the corresponding Firebase error and whatever we want the actual message to be. So let's do that here in our login form. What we're going to do is we're going to say const, oops, let me try that again. Const error message map. And what this is going to be is the strings that we get from Firebase auth. So I'm going to copy this one here, and I'm going to paste it there. And as the mapping here, we're going to give it the string that we want our app to actually display. So for that, we're going to say something like, please enter a valid email. All right. So let's just play around and get some other errors. Let's enter a valid email, but one that doesn't exist. We'll say @gmail.com, click login. Okay, we get this other one that says auth/user not found. So let's paste that there, and we'll say an account does not exist with that email. All right, so what else can we do? Let's do an actual user that exists, but with a password that's wrong, right? And we might have to refresh that here. Let me just try that and say john@gmail.com. And then for the password, we'll say blah, blah, blah. Click login. And here we go. We get wrong password. I'm not sure why it stuck the last time, but anyway, this gives us the wrong password message. So I'm just going to paste that in there now, and we'll say incorrect password as our string. Okay, now there might be a few other errors that could occur, right? I would imagine there's an error for if the request times out to Firebase or something like that. But for now, we're just going to keep these three, and if we get any others, we'll just display that raw string. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to use our error message map down here to display whatever the corresponding error message up here is that we want to show above our input. So we'll say error message map and try and find that error inside of there. Otherwise, what we'll do is return the string an error occurred. Okay, not a super helpful error string, but hopefully if all goes well, we should never see that one. And now if we go back here, we'll see that incorrect password is displayed instead of the actual Firebase auth error. And if we enter in stuff that doesn't exist too, we'll see that that says, please enter a valid email. If we enter a valid email that doesn't exist, .gmail.com, we'll see that we get an account does not exist with that email. So let's just add a little bit of styling to this thing here to make it, a little bit more appealing visually. What we're going to do, I don't know why I just closed all of those. Let's try this again. Let's open up login form, and what we're going to do is add a class name to our error message here, which will be something like, we'll just say error. And then we'll open up our index.css, and for this one, we're going to add an error class that says .error. And for this, we'll say background color, and we'll set that background color to red, and we'll set the actual color here to white. So it'll be white text on red. Might be a little bit too intense and, hard on the eyes, but let's take a look and see what that looks like. Ooh, yeah, that's it's kind of hard to read there. You know what? Let's just do background color and do something like pink. That'll actually look surprisingly good, I believe. And we'll remove color. And yeah, that seems to fit with the error theme there. So let's just put a little bit of padding around this error by saying padding. We'll do something like 8 pixels. See how that looks. Yep, that's looking pretty good. And then, as pretty much all of the other square elements in my applications generally have, we're going to say border, radius, and we'll do 8 pixels. Okay. Oops, there we go. And that is what our error message looks like now on our login page. Cool, so let's go do this on our create account page. And our create account page is going to have some different kinds of errors than what we saw on our login page. So what we're going to do for this one is we're going to open up our create account form and our create account page, which I opened and then closed again earlier. And we're going to do the same thing that we did with our login page and login form. And inside our create account page, we're going to have a state variable called error and set error, and we'll set that equal to use state, and it'll start off as an empty string here. So now when an error does occur when the user is creating an account, what we're going to do here, we'll just wrap this entire thing in a try catch block, and we'll say catch error, and if an error occurs, we'll say set error to error.message. And what that will allow us to do here is check to see if the password is equal to confirm password, and if it's not, then we can throw an error and have this error flow that we're going to set up here take care of that, just the same way as it would take care of Firebase auth errors, as you'll see. All right, so essentially what we're going to do, I'm going to say if password does not equal confirm password. Oops, let's try deleting those here. I'm going to just change this around a little bit and say, if that's the case, throw a new error with the message, and we'll just put a message in here saying something like password and confirm password don't, here I got to use a backslash here, don't match. And there we go. Okay, so that should throw an error message. This thing will pick up on the message, and we're going to have another error message map for our create account page, just like we did in our login page. So we'll say const. Oh, here, that'll actually be in the form. Let's go into here. And first of all, we're going to add an error prop. And then inside our create account form, we'll say const error message map equals. And now we just have to generate some errors. So let's display this error first. We'll say if error exists, then we want to display a paragraph tag with the error inside of it. Or here, we'll do error message map error, like that. Or the string an error occurred as the backup. Oh, and actually that's not going to work yet. Let's just display the error itself for the time being. I'm just going to comment that out. Oops, I didn't want to do that. You know what? I'll retype that in a minute. We're just going to display the error for now so that we can see it. So we'll say error, and that should be all we need to do besides passing this error state through to our create account form component. We'll say error equals error, and we should be good. Oh, we need to import use state. I made that same mistake before. We'll say import use state from React, and there we go. All right, so let's test out our create account with some dumb stuff here. We're just going to enter that, no password. We'll click create account, and we see that that says internal errors. So we'll just copy that, and actually let's take a look at what that error was. All right, we should be able to click this again and see that happen. Okay, so we're getting a 400 request, which means that the request was malformed, and that's because we're not including any kind of password in the request. So for this one, we're just going to copy that and paste it into our create account form error message map. And this will say something like, please double check your information and re-enter. Okay, we'll do something like that. That should be good for now. And the next one, let's try actually entering some passwords, but ones that don't match. Okay, and this will be an error message that's coming from us. And that one we can just leave, right? So that one we'll just put in an entry here. Oops, let's try that again. We'll just paste that. Oops, I meant to copy that. I guess I didn't get it. Let's try it again. Okay, we're going to paste that now. And I'm going to have to insert a backslash there. And then we'll do the same thing, which I can just copy from here and paste. And we got to add those single quotes there to make that work. And now if that happens, that'll give us the same thing. And now if we enter in passwords that do match, I'll just do ABC123, ABC123. And if we enter in an email that isn't an actual email and click create account, we'll see the invalid email thing again. So that one we can just copy from our from our login form. And okay, we'll just copy this one here and paste it in here. Okay, so please enter a valid email will be displayed for this one. Let's enter in a valid email now, but one that already has an account for it. And now if I click on create account, what we're going to see is that we'll get this email already in use string, which we can use to say a user already exists with that email address. All right, so those should be all of the major errors that we'll run into. Let's just convert this now to display messages from our error message map instead of just plain errors. We're going to say error message map error. Or, and I've actually been displaying, just a standard message like I did in the login form, but since I did that, I've changed my mind. I want to just display the error message itself if we get one that we haven't put in here, just in case there's one that we've forgotten about, so that we're not just displaying a pointless message. So let's just say error message map error, or we'll display the error message itself. And that should be all we need to do. So let's try and do this again. We're going to see that this says a user with that email address already exists. If we add some extra stuff and make the passwords not match, we'll see password and confirm password don't match. If we put in something that isn't an email address and make the passwords match, because the password matching comes first, we're going to see please enter a valid email. And I believe that's it. So now we just have to add the correct class name to this paragraph tag. So we'll say class name equals, and then this will be error, just like our other one that we saw. Okay, we see please enter a valid email now, looking good. So that should be all we need to do for the error handling on our login and create account pages. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.